Wivenhoe Dam reached beyond 190% capacity. So much water, all bound for the suburbs of Brisbane. Almost everything in its path was swept away: jetties, pontoons and yachts. A chunk of Drift Restaurant tore away in the torrent. And late Wednesday night, Brisbane's Riverwalk finally let go.
Many watched spellbound as it carried boats and trees and part of David Moore's dream.
In September we won Best New Restaurant, and that was an amazing coup for us. And then in January we lost everything.
David's Milton restaurant Drift was one of the city's first casualties. Its dramatic demise played out in front of everyone when a section tore from its moorings and swept downstream. It was an event that confirmed we were at the river's mercy for the first time in 4 decades. By the end of the week, as people headed back to the heartbreak of swamped, muddied homes, a tale of two cities had emerged: those whose lives had been swallowed by the floodwaters and those untouched. It's something that became clear to David Moore when some 1,600 volunteers turned up to help mend his broken restaurant dream.
And I spoke to this one woman who actually said to her, I said, why are you coming here? And she said, because I feel guilty. She said, I live at 8 Mile Plains, my husband has a great job, we have a beautiful house, our kids are fine, we have not been affected whatsoever.
It was a sentiment echoed many times over as an army of volunteers marched their goodwill into businesses and homes everywhere.
One of the many memorable images from the Brisbane floods was the Drift restaurant, once moored on the banks of the Brisbane River. Most of it was washed away, eventually hitting the Goodwill Bridge. Well, owner David Moore did not have flood insurance, and a year later he's still battling to recover. David Moore joins me now on the phone. David Moore, I guess many people outside of Brisbane wouldn't have known what has actually happened to the Drift restaurant.
Well, at the moment it's still sitting on the bank of the river, waiting for the government to review the compensation claim that has been put in many months ago.
Well, I was going to ask you, it's been a year since the floods. Why do you think it's taking so long getting this compensation claim sorted out from the Queensland government?
Well, when the venue was built in 1988, it had to seek council approval for that. And for that council approval, the building had to be designed to float and withstand the 1974 floods that hit Brisbane.
They might be spectacular scenes for people of Brisbane.
When that happened, when the flood happened, unfortunately the government actions when they took possession of the building sank the building. So under the Disaster Act, the compensation claims are being processed. And I suppose, like anything, that the government must tick all the boxes to make sure that they're doing the right thing.
So when you just remind us, when you say the government took possession of the building, there was fears that it was going to sort of sink and its moorings were actually going to drag it down. So they actually took over and cut it loose, didn't they?
No, what had happened actually is that the venue was designed to float and it was beginning to float. We had one more cut to do to break it from the mainland for it to float. The government took possession just prior to that happening and not allowing that to actually do what it was designed to do. The part that was actually broken off and ripped down the river was the cafe that was located right next to the actual venue itself.
All right. So you've been battling the Queensland government over this compo claim. I would imagine that you would also be battling perhaps a lot of suppliers, even the tax office that might have come knocking, people not understanding exactly, the situation that you found yourself in.
Yes, no, definitely. Unfortunately, once the venue was destroyed, it pushed the actual debt that we held for the venue, which was about $1 million of bank loans and into supplies and taxes. Unfortunately, it's been a rough 12 months of people trying to understand that we're unable to pay that. Even the ATO, if it wasn't for the works of Bernie Ripple and Mayor Paul Pasali here at Ipswich, we wouldn't have been able to put that off until everything was sorted out by the claim.
David Moore, do you have any hope or desire to rebuild Drift?
I would love to. The actual building itself was one of Brisbane's most iconic restaurants prior to the flood. So certainly to rebuild and put the old girl back on her feet again would be a shining star for Brisbane.
You may have seen this one, Drift. It still lies empty and in disrepair along the side of Milton Road. Owner David Moore says it suffered about $4 million in damage, and he's asking the state government to foot that bill. There are many heartbreaking stories from the Brisbane floods, and you're looking at one of them. It provided one of the most enduring images of the floods when, on Tuesday the 11th, part of the Drift restaurant on Coronation Drive actually was broken off and catapulted down the river. Here's what happened next. That pontoon was destroyed, and what was left of the restaurant was also destroyed when almost 4 metres of water went racing through here as the Brisbane River rose so fast. And here, 1 year on, is what we're looking at. A lot of people are back on their feet. This place couldn't be further from it. There's graffiti all over the place, windows are still smashed. As you can see, there's barely nothing in here. It's been stripped out. We're just walking over the floor joists at the moment, and I'm with the owner now, David Moore, and we remember seeing shots of you on the day. You remember back that far?
Oh, I don't think I'll ever forget it. It's one of those days that stuck in my mind forever, I think.
How did you feel when they told you basically get out? You got nothing out of the place, did you? What did you lose?
I think at that moment it was like the life support was being switched off. You know, 1 minute you've got this amazing venue that's skyrocketing through Brisbane and becoming so well known, and the next minute you've lost everything. No time was given for us to take any of the possessions from the building, and then to be called back an hour and a half, 2 hours later, then to open up all the doors and windows was just, I suppose, one of the most horrific experiences I've ever had.
Where are you at now? This place, it's just a mess.
Yeah, we're just waiting to hear back from the government with regards to the claim that's gone in with them. Under the Disaster Act, we can actually claim compensation for loss and damage because of the actions that they've taken.
So you're committed to getting this back and running again?
Oh, definitely. You know, this venue is, prior to the floods, was one of the most iconic restaurants in Brisbane, and to rebuild it and to reopen the doors would just be amazing for us.
What's basically remaining here now is essentially a barge with a roof on it that's still on the water. Rod Smith is part of the group that was the architects and engineers initially for the building, and is it able to be rebuilt?
Yes, our senior structural engineers inspected the building shortly after the event when the water went down, and he's said that the building is in satisfactory condition. It was never designed to be underwater, but it's been remarkable how well it's survived the flood.
Brisbane River's only floating restaurant has drifted into a bureaucratic nightmare. The flood-ravaged building's owner wants to reopen, but is still waiting for compensation.
There are no water views here. Diners look out over a meticulously kept golfing green instead. The Drift restaurant has resurfaced 30 kilometres away near Ipswich, but only because David Moore's friend offered the Brookwater venue for free.
Further away from the water as possible.
He can laugh now, but in reality, that was his retirement fund. The rest of it, little more than a scrap heap, sits idle on the river. Mr. Moore desperately wants to reopen, but he can't.
He is a casualty of those floods. Pay up.
The state government hasn't honoured his claim for compensation, despite emergency management orders on the 11th of January to abandon ship.
I remember because I was pleading with them because we only had half an hour to go to do the final cut, then she just would have popped out and floated.
Instead, the landmark was inundated. The restaurant owner left high and dry.
The Premier's office says there is provision under the Disaster Management Act to award compensation in a unique situation like this. There have been discussions, a decision expected soon.